We need a motion to come out of executive session, please.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All right, 4-0. And at this point in time, we will have Mr. Rutledge from the group of, or Mr. Jones come before. Right, and Mr. Jones will introduce the group from Columbus. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, board members.
I knew when I looked at you, you looked kind of funny, and I'm going, oh gosh, something's up.
That's fine. I appreciate your time. I wanted to introduce our audit group tonight. Mr. Brian Rutledge and Ms. Jenna K. Favors. For those of you that have been on the board a good while, they've been our recurring audit partner for many, many years. They're going to come up and give you a brief review of our annual comprehensive financial report, and that acronym used to be CAFR, now we've changed and proactively changed that to a new standard. I did want to say that I appreciate their patience this year. This district, as I told you last year, has been really progressive in the timing of their audits. You know, you really have to March 31st to get this done for federal purposes. If you do an ACFR annual report, you really need to be done by December 31st to meet that standard. Obviously, the good Lord had a different plan for me this year, so we got an extension on that to January 31, and we meet that because we met the other day and filed. So I am happy as they come up to tell you again that we will be one of probably 60 districts out of 188 in the state that are low risk. And so with all of the healthy debate we've had this year, Mr. Rutledge, we're still proud to pull that off. So thanks a lot, Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Madam Chair, Superintendent, and board members. Appreciate y'all adjusting your agenda. Certainly didn't have to do that, but we certainly appreciate it. Hope I'm not changing anything up here. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to do the Griffin Spalding audit. As Mr. Jones said, we've been here for quite a number of years, and good school system. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you all, and Mr. Simmons and Mr. Jones. And again, our job is to come in and give an opinion on your financial statements, and that opinion shows up in the financial section. So we do a few things, and I'm going to be brief. As Mr. Jones said, we met with Ms. McDonald, Mr. Doss, Mr. Simmons, and Mr. Jones last week for about an hour and 15 minutes, and they said I better not take that long tonight. So our job is to come in and give an opinion on your financial statements. We gave a clean audit opinion. We're also required to give a couple of reports on your internal control over financial reporting, and then also your internal controls and compliance with major federal programs. And so I'll talk about those. As far as the financial highlights, that's in the MD&A section. The assets of the system and deferred outflows exceeded its liabilities and deferred inflows by about $49 million. At June 30, 2021, the system's general fund reported a fund balance of about $26.2 million, which was an increase of about $5.5 million from the prior fiscal year. Unassigned fund balance is $25.4 million. Splost collections for the year increased about 19% as compared to collections in fiscal year 2020. So a real strong year in sales tax collections in the county. And then you paid off your general obligation debt was paid off during the year. So principal last year was $6.7 million. That was paid off during the year. So there's no bond debt as of the end of the year. Also want to mention there was a GASB 84 that came out that caused a restatement in your financial statements. There's a note in there, note 13, that discusses that. So a restatement sometimes is, when there's a problem with the previous year. This is not the case. The standard required student activity funds to be reported as other governmental funds instead of just fiduciary funds. So the beginning fund balance was restated for that. There was a GASB 84 that came out that caused a restatement in your financial statements. There's a note in there, note 13, that discusses that. So a restatement sometimes is, when there's a problem with the previous year. This is not the case. The standard required student activity funds to be reported as other governmental funds instead of just fiduciary funds. So the beginning fund balance was restated for that. There was a GASB 84 that came out that caused a restatement in your financial statements. There's a note in there. All right. Sorry about that. Sorry I had to hear that again. As I mentioned, we give our opinion on the financial statements, and then there's two other.
Get this a little closer for that.
Okay. There's two other reports that we also give the internal control over financial reporting. That's on page 117 and 118. We discuss in here, we did identify a deficiency in internal control that's described in here that we consider to be a significant deficiency. We did not consider it to be a material weakness. Therefore, as Mr. Jones mentioned, y'all continue to be a low-risk auditee, which is, as he said, most of the districts are not low-risk auditees in the state. We did not, our test didn't disclose any instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under governmental auditing standards. And then the other report is the report on major federal programs. We had that same instance of non-compliance, which is required to be reported. And that's in the report on page 120. But in our opinion, the system complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year ended. So complied in all material respects, but we did disclose an incident of non-compliance and a deficiency in internal control over compliance, which again is related to the same finding. Page 122 shows your federal financial assistance, $17.5 million. It's up a little bit, about $4 million over last year, primarily from the ESSER funds, which you received about $5.5 million. And then the page 124 is the summary of our auditor's results. Again, it goes through that unmodified opinion, talks about the significant deficiencies in the internal control over financial reporting and on the compliance and other matters. On page 125, number 9, talks about that you did qualify as a low-risk auditee, which I mentioned earlier. And then on page 126 is the finding, and I believe y'all have already discussed this, but it was the miscalculation of salaries. We noted during our testing certain salaries charged to a federal program were miscalculated based on the applicable salary schedule. So that miscalculated part was not an allowable cost for the federal program. It was caught before the final completion report was filed, so it was moved from the federal program to the general fund. So nothing has to be done with the grant since it was caught before that was sent off. So our recommendation is the system fully adhere to the accounting and internal control procedures in order to minimize its exposure to such control weaknesses in the future. So that's all I was going to mention in the big ACFR report. Again, clean audit opinion, and again, appreciate Byron and his group and all they did to get the information to us. As he mentioned, it is later than normal, but obviously a lot going on this year, new ESSER funds, new requirements, and so again, was able to extend that deadline where it's due December 31st, and he was able to get it filed within the extension period. We also do a Splost performance audit, and again, nothing unusual in this. We concluded that administrative controls are in place. Concluded process for soliciting and evaluating proposals for bids is adequate and promotes active competition among bidders, and then conclude that the cash management of these funds has been conducted in a sound fiscal manner. So a clean Splost report. And then the other book we have is the reports to the board. Again, this is a required, the second tab, required communication with those charged with governance. It talks about our responsibility in relation to the audit, the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. As we said, the timing was delayed a little bit from normal years. Talks about significant accounting policies, significant accounting estimates, difficulties encountered performing the audit, no difficulties besides the delay in receiving certain information during our audit, which affected the timing of certain audit procedures. Uncorrected and corrected misstatements. Management has corrected all identified misstatements. Disagreements with management. As Mr. Jones mentioned, he disagreed with the reporting, the miscalculation of salaries as a significant deficiency in internal control. But again, that was resolved. We requested representations from management, and we got those. And so again, that's the main parts in that letter that, again, we're required to go over with you all. And then there's a 5-year analysis that does an analysis for the governmental activities and the general fund. And again, it shows at the bottom there your fund balance of $26.2 million in the general fund. Days in fund balance is 98 days. So again, strong looking financial statement, strong looking fund balance. Again, we talked about it on the call we had last week. With all the things going on and future funding and not sure where that's going to be, it's good to have a strong fund balance as you look forward to these next few years. So again, that's all I had as far as going through these reports. Again, appreciate the opportunity, and we'll be glad to try to answer any questions any of you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Anyone have any questions?
One, Brian. You know, with the CARES fund being emergency relief pass-through funds, how exactly, and I haven't had a chance to look at these in depth, but how is that money going to affect us on our financial analysis? How they going to affect us on when someone comes in and audit our books or do whatever? I don't know if you understand what I'm asking. That money being seen as pass-through, is it going to affect us in the future, or how will it affect us?
No, it's always shown as pass-through. It comes from the federal government through the state, and so the state passes it through to all the local school boards. So that's normal. It doesn't affect how you all are looked at.
Yeah, I'm speaking about funding coming down in the future. And the reason I ask, a lot of people don't understand about austerity reductions, and Spalding County took a $30 million hit over that time, and people think that the governor or whoever giving us money, but no, we haven't made up that $30 million deficit. So we haven't really gotten anything because we were already shorted $30 million through our austerity reductions. And I'm just thinking how that's going to look when they look at funding us or giving us funds in the future. I'm just making sure that's not going to hurt school systems.
No, I don't think so. The state obviously has its own funding formula, and hopefully they fund the full formula. A lot of times they don't, and that's where you get into the austerity reductions, and that's what we were talking about last week, is why it's important that you have fund balance to offset any future austerity reductions. Because as you remember, a few years ago, those things were pretty steep, and y'all are having to look at programs and potential cuts and things like that. And that's what Mr. Simmons was talking about, that he's looking out to year 25, 2026, and make sure that y'all are in such good financial condition that you can withstand potentially any decreases in your funding.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Any other questions, board members? All right, thank you all so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate your assistance.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a safe trip. All right, at this time, I think we're ready to go into executive session, and I need a motion, please.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please. 4-0. All right, well, we're going to move into executive session for real. Thank you.
Ms. Ray, just because you caught that, man, don't be looking for no bonus or nothing. You hear what Ms. Ray? She said, make sure when we get in the executive session, put in for her bonus for catching that.
right, thank you for your patience. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. And we'll start with our action items. The administrative 2022-2023 recommendations. Waiting on a motion to accept the recommendations.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor for the administrative recommendations, central office principal, and AP recommendations, please raise your hand. All right, we have 4-0.
Yes.
Thank you. Presence Learning, Psychological Evaluations, Contracted Services, Mr. Kelly.
Good evening, Board. Superintendent Simmons. I'm here tonight to discuss the Presence Learning Teletherapy and Remote Psychoeducational Assessments. The department is requesting to enter into a contract with Presence Learning to provide online psychological evaluations and teletherapy services as needed for students with IEPs and those being evaluated for eligibility for IEPs. The estimate of costs for online services and evaluations and the use of the company's online evaluation platform will be approximately $65,000. The costs associated with the contracted online psychological evaluations will be funded through the local special education budget that was previously approved for contracted services. It is recommended that the contract with Presence Learning to provide teletherapy and online evaluations for students be approved. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Mr. Kelly, I just have a quick question. I was curious as to, it says here, third paragraph down, the district has not been able to locate and hire school psychologists. I find that kind of astounding because I thought that was, my recall is it was pretty easy to, do we know why, I guess, or?
Currently, there's 2 programs in the state that produce school psychologists. There's a statewide and really a nationwide shortage of school psychologists. Many districts right now, I've talked with other directors in the region and a little bit further outside the region, they're down 3 or 4 school psychologists this year, and they're looking. We've had the application open since last year. We've had 2 qualified candidates and interviewed both, and neither have worked out.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to accept Presence Learning teletherapy for remote psychoeducational assessment. Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Please raise your hand if you are in favor. We have a 4-0 vote for the Mr. Kelly's. We appreciate it, Mr. Kelly. Thank you. And you also have the school psychology contracted services.
Yes, ma'am. All right, I'm here also to discuss the contracted virtual school psychologist services. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the contract with Mary Beth Hodgins to provide contracted school psychological services for the remainder of the school year. The contract cost would be $425 per evaluation for a total cost of $42,000 to be paid out of the American Rescue Plan supplement to the 611 IDA flow-through grant. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, any questions, board members?
I'm just wondering what does the evaluation entails? What does that include?
So she's going to utilize the platform that comes with Presence Learning to be able to provide online evaluations. So we would have a proctor on our end, and then she would complete those online virtually. So you'd have the student and our proctor, and then the psychologist would be online through a secured platform.
That would just be for that one intake evaluation of the student, right?
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Is that just for that one intake evaluation of that student?
Yes, so they would complete the evaluations, exactly. So that's all we're asking through this service.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
I have a follow-up question. Mr. Kelly, so the psychologist itself will receive $425 per completed evaluation and report up to 20 evaluation reports per month. So the entire system is $42,000. How many scholars do you think will benefit from this particular psychological services?
So the estimate was, I believe, 2.5 to 3 months of evaluations through the end of the school year. So that's 20 per. So it's around 50 to 60, 45 to 60 in that range. So it's up to 20 per year. So the 42,000 is the maximum amount. It might not go up to 42,000, but we wanted to
Okay.
have that leeway there.
Are we behind because of numerous things that have happened in our world in the last 2 years? Are we behind evaluating?
Yes, there's a lot of different factors in that. We've seen a lot more referrals for younger kids that may not have been in a structured environment, as far as like young learners in a pre-K setting or in even a daycare setting. So we've got a lot of new, fresh referrals, and then we have a lot more school-age referrals, just because students have been in and out of virtual setting. So it's harder to identify students that way. So now that we're in a consistent in-person, we're seeing a lot more referrals. That and the staffing issue, with locating school psychologists have created a backlog, definitely.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion?
And so, another follow-up question. So it seems like the person doing the professional services, they're only going to be compensated per the evaluation that they complete.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I can go ahead and make a motion to accept item 9, item 3, action item number 9, number 3 for contracted services.
All right, thank you.
Second.
All right, we also have a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All right, 4-0, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. All right, Cowan Road Middle renovation, Mr. Ballard.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Simmons. I'm here tonight to bring to you our next round of renovation projects. We'd like to move forward with this where we can go ahead and get things under contract and hopefully get the submittal process going and products coming in to be able to start this summer and to be able to, right now the plan is to complete this project in the summer of 2023, kind of our norm here the last few years over a 2-summer project. We put it out to bids on the Georgia Procurement Registry and went out to 916 vendors, but we only ended up with 2 bidders. But there were 2 good bids. A company that we're very familiar with, have done a lot of our work here, Media Construction Company, were the low bidder, and they were 16% lower than the next highest bidder. And that being the case, we would like to recommend that Griffin Spalding County Board of Education approve the low base bid of $4,888,000 as submitted by Media, or $880,000. I see a mistake up there. $880,000 submitted by Media Construction Company for the Cowan Road Middle School renovation project.
Any questions? All right, do I have a motion? All right, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. And Mr. Harper, infrastructure refresh.
Good evening, School Board, Mr. Simmons. This is our district infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about everything that makes the internet work. All the internal components, everything in the cabinets, cabling, wires, ceilings, all that stuff. So we are requesting purchases through our E-rate. Right now, we're on the January timeline of submitting this, even though it's February 1st. They knew we were having this conversation today, so they said that was acceptable to keep it in that time frame. So staying along this course with your approval, we'll begin with purchasing equipment and we'll start installation in April. We'll just be doing cabling, which won't take down the network, so it won't interfere with testing. I've already talked with Ms. Jones about that. So the recommendation then is that the Griffin Spalding Board of Education approves funding for the purchase of network equipment for an amount not to exceed $1,757,159.54 to be paid for through E-rate funding and by Splost 6. Any questions?
What's the time frame on that, Mr. Lundy?
So when we start in April, the goal with the company that's contracted as part of the proposal is that we'll be finished by September.
September.
Yes, sir. So that'll be summer work the entire time, after evenings during the school year, and then finishing up in the evenings too once school starts back.
Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harper. All right, for the presentation and discussion items, we have Mr. Jones as far as the December financial report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, board members again. As I'm getting started, again, I'm appreciative of the superintendent and the board chair letting the auditors go ahead and get on their way back to Columbus. I'm appreciative of that. Again,
Next time, just tell me to be quiet. I looked at you, it was funny, and then,
that's fine. Again, I appreciate it, though.
absolutely.
So like I say every time, I'll try to be real brief this evening since we're at the tail end here. So this is our, again, short version of financial report, focusing on column 1, general fund reserve approximately $25 million. And you heard from the auditors approximately $26 million. This is a fluid number until we get those final numbers back from them, and we'll true up our ending balances for the year. So for right now, it's $24 million. That will actually vary some as we go to the next slide, which is our general fund monthly financial for December. We'll see probably a sharp increase next month, which will be the January financial based on getting the bulk of the tax collections. I think one of the checks was $13 million that we got, and we would have got it January the 7th, somewhere in that neighborhood. So again, in the January ending month that we'll present in March, you'll be able to see a big increase on that. So 36.9 on revenues, 37.9 on expenditures. Again, that's pretty well tracking as it normally does in the month of January. Page 3, again, is our special revenue fund. As I've indicated to you before, we've started working on a one-page snapshot of all funds. We're not really complete with that yet because it has a lot of data entry we have to do to compile that sheet. But next month, I'll plan on giving you something that may substitute for this report to let you compare, or we may keep doing this report. But I just wanted to let you know, based on your GSBA presentation, we're still working on that. Page 4, again, is Mr. Wheeler's nutrition area. We've been kind of brainstorming the last few days, he and I, on some different things he's got coming up. So the fund balance there is almost $1 million, reflective, again, of the waiver and the way that's affecting our revenues and expenses in the current year. Investment summary, again, $25.5 million there with a really low interest rate, but those are conservative investments. You know, we're not allowed to go on a risk-based approach too much since it's public money, so those interest rates continue to be low. Page 6, again, is our Splost comparison, almost a $1.1 million again. You've got to go all the way back to February of 2020 to see anything under $1 million. So that continues to be outstanding. Really puts the board in a good position moving forward. So any questions as far as the financial report goes?
Mr. Jones,
Yes, sir.
looking at the general fund and the shortfall that we have compared to December 2020, and the expenditure compared to the revenue that we had to come in, what are the, I don't know all the, I know you do all the parameters about the relief fund money from CARES. What are the parameters as far as using it for any shortfalls in that area that we?
Are you talking about a general CARES question or something relative to this particular
Yeah,
report?
I'm asking, can the CARES relief fund be used in the general
Yeah, so
operation?
So good question. If you remember, and we'll talk more about this when we get to budget, I'll remind you of what we decided, what you approved last year. So we offset general fund expenditures, I'm going to say 6 to 7 million somewhere. I have to get the exact number in our budget book. You know, we moved certain classes of employees, classes being administrative salaries over under a blurb called continuity of services.
Right.
And that was an eligible item. And we did that strategically. The challenge for us will be, can we continue that next year? Can we sustain to do that, or will the government allow us to do that? There's an ongoing discussion about that with auditors, and it's funny that you're asking that, because superintendent sent out a email this weekend on the audit thing that GSSA is putting out, that a lot of school districts are receiving audit finding based on how they use that CARES money. We did not receive that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there was approximately $6 million that we moved.
You know, I know, and you just kind of, alluded to what I know. It's CARES money for stuff that they shouldn't be using. But there's some shortfalls that we are having, and I know other systems are having. I was just curious as to the flexibility of using CARES money to cut.
Right. So CARES, we have 1, 2, and 3 of CARES. CARES 1, CARES 2. CARES 1's basically over with, and they audited that in the report. There was just a few $1,000s left. CARES 2 was used for the first time in the year we're in right now to offset the salaries I'm talking about to help our general fund last year.
Right.
CARES, and we will look to see if we can do that next year. CARES 3 does not have much of any continuity of services, or if it does, it's under other things, like where we had a retention supplement, things like that could qualify under that definition, but not necessarily moving general salaries and things of that over. So we'll have to get more guidance if we get in a situation where fund balance goes down and that becomes an issue.
And specifically what I'm alluding to, you'll see where we had revenue of 36.92%, and our expenditures were 37.96%. And I know we can pinpoint what expenditures were over. And I was mainly asking, can CARES money be used to cover those expenditures that exceeded our revenues coming in?
Yeah. So the short answer would be yes, I believe, to an extent. And to go one step further, the planning of that, if you look under school administration on the budget line, $2.757 million, and I'm on the financial report, the one that's on the screen, that number is normally $7 million. So we, like I said, we had planned to offset salaries by that, and our revenues will go dramatically up above expenses in January, because again, we will get all of that tax money will actually be booked into our ledger in that time frame. Do you understand what I'm talking about, Mr.?
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. So the budget there on school administration, $2.7 million. If I go back a year, I don't have the number, but let's just say it's $8 million, $8.7 million. That's the $6 million. We reduced the budget, and that money was moved over to CARES to offset. So our general fund only was budgeted around $94 million, where in prior years it might have been close to $100 million. That's another reason that the Collier Reserve needs to stay as it is.
You know where I was going, bro.
So from a financial standpoint, in my summary sheet, again, you've got your legal recap for that superintendent's office would have forwarded you on that. So is there any other questions on the financial report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next thing I want to cover with you pretty brief is a budget timeline presentation. The superintendent and I discussed about maybe getting on maybe a repetitive basis of keeping you informed on budget items. So kind of from a timeline to let you know what to expect. So what I'm presenting to you is a small tweaked version of what I covered with the admin staff. And I know we've got a couple of principals here in the audience, so they can attest this is pretty much what they saw with a couple of tweaks to it that I'll talk about in a minute. So communicating effectively is my goal tonight. Hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about of our non-negotiables. Mission and vision, again, to be able to fund the items to empower our students to graduate college and career ready is what all of our goals are. Most of what we talk about on our beliefs, it all ties back somewhat to budget. If we can't fund what's important to us, then we have an ongoing problem that we can't support. So the fourth slide here, aligning the resources, the far left bottom bullet is what I'm focusing on with this presentation tonight. So for the schools, I wanted to talk a second here about this. A couple of principals are in the audience, and they had asked me before the meeting, they've got a job fair coming up on February 12th, and we had originally shared with them, we would share their budget items with them on February 18th. So after Ms. Battle and I and the superintendent and cabinet discussed it, we're going to move that up to February 7th so that they can get some preliminary data to let them be able to see, hey, have I got the ability to hire in the first place? So our goal is to Ms. Battle and I and Ms. Austin with Federal Programs to send some of this out by sometime on Monday. And I don't know if this will be the complete budget information, but it will be allotment stuff, which that ties into this the third bullet I wanted to mention. That stuff will be due back to us by March 16th. The third bullet, we had some conversation last year. I want to just make sure everybody's aware. We're going to provide data to the principals in a formula matrix. You earn this based on this criteria. You're up or down versus the prior year on this criteria, and we have to follow a RAMP, resource allocation methodology plan that the board has every year that we have to approve every summer. So if they receive data that says they're -1 or +3, they're going to get that data. We have to share the gross data with them. And so if you'll remember last year when we had this conversation, there was a decision to leave schools whole to the tune of about $2 million. And the $2 million is because if you add up all the personnel and the average cost, it was about 25 to 30 positions, if I remember correctly. So it's about $2 million. So again, we're going to send the raw data out. There's not an expectation from Superintendent's Office that we make whole again. So they're going to get that. We'll have further conversations after we see current FTE counts as we continue to update them. And I believe in our last FTE count, Dr. Sauce continues to update us. We're down about another 100 children versus the prior year. So I know most of the numbers we're using are 9,600, 9,500, and a few years ago it was 9,900, 10,000. Depends on if you count pre-K or not in that formula. So 100 kids lost is about $500,000. You just need to, when I'm talking about it, just say he's talking about $5,000 a child, and it could go up or down based on special needs, gifted, et cetera, but the average is 5. So we could be down another 500 in FTE.
While you're on that, Mr. Jones, that was what I wanted to ask a question about with us using January's enrollment and knowing that we have had some students to leave the system. So I'm just asking you I guess the systems process with this, knowing how these numbers have been fluctuating. How would we? Is there anything that we would do to kind of put a cushion or buffer?
The formula itself is based on some equity items built in. I didn't build the formula. This is something I'm following the footsteps on some of this. It's built in some EIP items, where the ranking of certain schools are as far as performance. I'd have to go back and look at the matrix or show it to you, but there are some items built into that. I know last year we provided an additional assistant principal for one of the schools based on something we rewrote into the RAMP plan based on how they scored the prior year, some data. So and I'm going to share that with the superintendent. If he looks at this and says, Byron, this looks way off, we'll reconsider that.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because we don't want to put these principals of schools at a deficit for them not to have the staffing needs that they may end up having with starting a new school year.
Right.
And we did it, the formula based on January's enrollment. You understand where I'm going?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Sigmund.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I hear and understand, Mr. Holmes. I think what Mr. Jones is trying to communicate is the need to begin to position ourselves to maintain and sustain based on FTE. Because if we don't, sooner or later, we're going to have conversations about people's employment. And so rather than continuing to try and staff for students that aren't present, we're going to try and start to slowly back ourselves back into a circumstance to where we staff based on FTE. We kind of broke that mold a little bit with the pandemic.
Yeah.
The pandemic may never go away, but the monies that the flow through that you just heard the auditors talk about, there will be no more. And so we've got to position ourselves. And so that's really what that comment is about. But do know my commitment is to take care of our schools because they're taking care of our children. They will have what they need. What we may not be able to continue to do is surplus our way into smaller class sizes. We may have to be more strategic in scheduling formulas, but right now we have a surplus of staff, which equates to a smaller classroom.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. But you understand.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yes, sir.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, good question. And again, I'm just ringing the bell for everybody to understand what we have to go through, and we're going to make a committed effort to give the schools data earlier to try to get them to where they can be positioned to make some good decisions. So our plan is to get that out by Monday. We will also send the schools some virtual meeting invites. We're going to ask them to do a virtual meeting with us beginning March 21st over a 2-week period. And then as I flip over to the next page, this is just some stuff that we'll ask them to comment on in the meeting. I've got to redo some forms, update some forms. They know what I'm talking about when I say program evaluations. If they've got something new that the cabinet needs to be aware of for a recommendation, we need to have information that we understand what they're asking. So we'll get all that stuff out to them. The next slide is just to talk about the departments. They'll go through a similar process where they'll receive information no later than February 25th with some instructions, and they're tasked with providing what we call an object code budget back to us, which is a non-salary, the tangible items that they'll send back with descriptor items, and we'll analyze that as well. They'll be due back on March 23rd or before, and then we plan to have some of those present to cabinet no later than the week of April 4th through the 8th. That should be the week before spring break. Really wanted to talk to you about this just a second, some items to consider. We just talked about the first two, FT enrollment decreases, and I'm sure that we're not insulated, that we're the only county around that's losing children in the state formula. So we do have that issue going on. Again, over the last couple of years, we've probably lost 600 kids total, so that could be $3 million. You know, and it continues to recur because every year, even if you sustain and don't lose any more, you're still not getting that back, like you said about austerity earlier.
Right.
We're still trying to cover from 2002. We still haven't got all that back yet. We talked a little bit about the make whole legislative session. Again, you all know this is a governor election year. There's already been some kind of tangible items put out there that would probably make our staff happy if the governor and the legislature has to follow through with that. It's not just he says it and it happens. They have to approve that, and sometimes, but the final answer, it comes up a little bit different. So anytime that happens, it puts pressure on you to fund things that are not funded at the state level.
And Mr. Jones, I appreciate you saying that, but I think people need to hear that in depth, that we get mandates that are unfunded, which makes it hard for a school system. And I'm glad you said that, because I don't think some are aware of what you just said, those mandates, those unfunded mandates. Thank you for saying that.
Sure, absolutely. So legislative session, again, if I saw something the other day around April 4th, they're going to try to be done. So, I mean, to me, that's good news. Sometimes it drags later than that. So hopefully we could get our allotment sheets early. You remember we showed you that at the retreat last year, had on the big screen. So new school improvement plan also, superintendent is working with the Glissy Group, Leadership Institute with the schools. So we want the budget items to fit into that. We don't want the budget approved and then they do in the plan. We want all that kind of working together. Inflationary increases, I mean, turn on the TV and you know what gas is. I mean, it's hurting people in a lot of ways right now. Everything we buy is going up, so it hurts us as well. Longevity step for employees, I mean, that's something we talk about every year, whether it's classified employees, certified, there's that step to consider. There's a cost with that. And then the superintendent is considering a classified employee compensation study, considering it being there will be multiple options to consider. The study's done, the data's back. We're going to begin conversations of that with the cabinet and see what kind of recommendation he's going to have for y'all on that. But there will be a cost to that. So again, when you're looking at fund balance, you got to remember all of that. We're going to have to spend some money to get to where we want to be. So we need to have the money to be able to spend. We don't have to borrow the money. We don't have any debt.
Mr. Jones, do you know when we will be given the results of that compensation study? When the board will see the results?
Ms. Battle, do you want to forecast a date that we can share that with the board? Sure. Ms. Ray, will you let Ms. Battle use your microphone, please?
In the form of a presentation, we can actually bring that to you in the work session. That way you'll have an opportunity to review the information, and we can actually invite the representatives here that conducted that salary study for us. I came in on the tail end, but I understand what those options look like. So if you would give us a privilege and determine which work session, we could probably get it as early as this month. They're very eager and anxious to share those findings with the board.
Well, this is really important to me as a board member because we're losing people. And, you know, we've had these conversations among us with Mr. Simmons, and we all know that we have to take care of our people to be competitive in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. If you
I
will,
look- I look
Mrs.
forward to
Simmons,
seeing 'em.
hold the- Okay.
Thank you.
All right, our final two slides, and I'll be done. This is just to kind of give you an outlook from a budget planning standpoint of where we're at. I just want this to soak in. A lot goes in the month of February, whether it's presenting the plan to cabinet, presenting the plan at the admin meeting in February, which we did, or January meeting, excuse me. Having a meeting with you tonight, we actually just hit that on the first day of the month, so pretty early in the month of February. March will be when we retrieve that data back and have presentations from the schools and the departments. April, we will consolidate those items and deliberate with the superintendent. We will prepare the budget document and remember what you all got, and some of you have been getting this for years, but we try to go a step above. Instead of just giving you numbers, we give you a big book of stuff. It's a lot of work, but I hope it cuts down on your questions and answers it when you can read through it. Our goal is to present that stuff to you in May so we can go ahead and have our 2 required public hearings, get it approved in May, the tentative budget, and then in June, obviously have the final budget approval. If we are not able to do it in June, we have to get a resolution from y'all, so we want to avoid that if possible. And then this year, I want to focus on this last bullet. Both years I've been here, the millage rate adoption process has happened later than I was used to in all my other years. It's not that it's wrong, it's just maybe what this county is used to. I'd like to see if we could fast forward that a little bit. I'm going to talk to the tax assessors and commissioner's office, who have been really easy to work with, and see, there's a rule out there that if you get within, I'm going to say it's 3% of assessments, appeals, you can go on with your, the school board can. If they've got so many, you don't want to do that. And a lot of my career, we've been within that, so we're safe. The numbers that you're looking at for millage rate and stuff will be within a range as far as the appeals, and we can go on and have this done and get our hearings if we're in that situation. So you'll hear me talk more about that. If we're not able to pull it off, you saw what happened last year. You still have that. It just happened a little bit later. A lot of factors with me being out, et cetera. But that will be our goal. So just don't be surprised. Go back and look through the budget calendar. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer here or at another time.
Any questions, board members? Or thank you, Mr. Jones. It seems like we just did this. Thank you.
All right.
That concludes our agenda. I know at one time we had board comments on the end of the agenda. Does any board members have anything that they want to share with want to give you the option of having board comments?
I'm good on this.
Mr. Brown?
I do. I'm pulling it up now.
you know that February marks the start of Black History Month, created by Carter G. Woodson, where back in 1928 it started as a week, and now we have evolved to an entire month. And so, you know, this is my third year serving on this great board, and I always like to provide a Black history fact during this moment. And so I am pulling up my system so that I can give you a Black history fact as it relates to a African American female educator. Today's spotlight is the Honorable Marva Collins. When Marva Collins was dismayed at the low levels of learning she felt some scholars were experiencing in particular areas of Chicago, she started West Side Preparatory School, specifically named for the purpose of teaching low-income Black children. Marva Collins taught children deemed disabled by the Chicago public school system and said that she had the data to prove that scholars were teachable and were able to overcome. She also felt that she eliminated behavioral issues and allowed students to flourish just by giving them the love they needed and meeting them where they are. So today's Black History Spotlight is Marva Collins. No further comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Cook?
I want to send a shout out to our teachers. They have done an incredible job this year through the ups and downs of COVID's. I remember one of our central office staff saying if she was stranded on a desert island, she'd want teachers on that island with her because they could figure out how to do things, and that's true. I'm reminded of the quote from Christy McAuliffe, an astronaut who died in space, when she said, "To teach is to affect eternity." So shout out to all of our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook.
I'm gonna say something
Mr.
on
Holmes?
behalf of Mr. Simmons. You know, we have to look out for each other. Y'all take it easy on him this week. Take him out to lunch. He's still in mourning because of Tampa Bay and the GOAT Tom Brady retiring. So y'all take it easy on him. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. No further comments from me. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us via YouTube, and thank you for those in the room and for everything you do for our system and our students, our employees, and our parents. It's all about you. It's not about us. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
All righty.
That was a pretty good smack.
Good. Let me